All right, welcome to part 3. Here we're going to talk about cellular support and specialization. How are cells supported? So all these organelles, these cells are not just a big blob of goo. Okay, these cells have structure, and one of the components of this structure is the cytoskeleton. Okay, and the fibroblast cells of these fluorescent micrograph, we have the green stained are going to be the cytoskeleton. Okay, those are the intermediate filaments. Those are the ones supporting those organelles, providing tracks to move those vesicles along. Okay, and the cytoskeleton is made up of 3 types of protein fibers: the intermediate filaments, microfilaments, and microtubules. It's the microtubules that we need to be very familiar with. The microtubules are also what is responsible for forming cilia and flagella, and these structures are used for motion as well as organized into the spindle during mitosis by the centrosome region of the cell. Remember, both plants and animals have a centrosome region. They both have the microtubule organizing center. It's just that plants or plant cells do not have the centrioles to identify this region. So what do plant cells have in terms of support? Well, they do have cell walls made up of cellulose. Remember, this was your beta isomer of glucose. So remember, if you do not have a symbiotic relationship like we do not, we cannot break down cellulose for energy. Fungi have chitin cell wall, bacteria have peptidoglycan cell wall. Okay, but plants have cellulose cell wall. So how do substances get from cell to cell? Because cells have to transport stuff to each other. They have to transport nutrients. They have to transport water. They have to transport ions. So in order to do this, plants have openings called plasmodesmata, and this allows transport between plant cells. Think of your room. Okay, your door is like the plasmodesmata of the cell. The walls around your room are the cell wall. Okay, so there's only very limited openings in the plant cell wall through this plasmodesmata. Animal cells, on the other hand, we do not have a cell wall. However, we do have an extracellular matrix. This is made up of various proteins and carbohydrates and polysaccharides, and this is found in mostly animal cells. There are a few others that have a very limited extracellular matrix, but for the most part, for our purposes, they're found only in animal cells. And these play a role in cellular signaling and cellular communication, and it can tell us cells what to do, what a cell needs to do, and this becomes very handy in a multicellular environment where you have several cells connected together that need to work together as a team. So it allows these cells to communicate with each other. So a lot of our cells have this extracellular matrix to help talk to each other. Now, cells also have junctions. There are 3 different types of junctions. First one is tight junctions. And a lot of times we're going to find these in epithelial tissue and in animal cells. And what happens is proteins are going to seal cells together to form a very tight barrier. And this is going to be a leakage barrier. It's going to prevent water or other fluid from leaking out of this cell. So in a tissue type that does not need to lose any fluid, like in your epithelial tissue, you're going to find tight junctions. Another type of junctions that we find are called desmosomes, or anchoring junctions. Desmosomes are also found in animal cells, and these are going to act like rivets. They're really going to hold those cells together very, very tightly. Okay. Muscle cells. In order for muscle cells to work together, those fibers and cellular structures have to be held tightly together. So we're going to find desmosomes in muscle cells. And lastly, we have gap junctions. This would be almost the equivalent of plasmodesmata in plant cells. This allows cells of different tissues or cells of different cell layers or tissues to transfer materials to each other. This helps to increase speed of communication. So we're going to pass salts, we're going to pass communication molecules, we're going to pass water, all sorts of things. And we're going to have lots of transport proteins making up this gap junction. So in really important tissues, we're going to find these gap junctions. So in developing embryos, we're going to find them because we need to get those cells forming and differentiating and telling them which genes need to be on, which genes need to be off, so that embryo can develop correctly. So in order to do that, you have gap junctions to send that message from one cell to another rather quickly. Heart muscle as well. Heart muscle has gap junctions to help transfer information and these ions from one to another. So cell specialization, some multicellular organism cells are going to specialize in function. So for instance, your small intestine side, one that faces the inside of the small intestine, those cells have lots of little projections to increase surface area to increase absorption. This is called microvilli. So different cells of different tissues are going to have slightly different structures based upon what their job is. So they're going to have an increase in certain organelles to complete this function. So for example, liver. Your liver has large amounts of smooth ER to help with that detoxification role, as well as your muscle cell is going to have a lot of mitochondria for the energy output that it requires, because every time a muscle contracts, it requires ATP. Compartmentalization, so this endomembrane system and separating out different parts of the cell for different functions allows the cell to do more things. It allows for greater functions on the cellular organism level, which will translate to the organism level as well in the formation of tissues and tissues having specific jobs to function the organ.
Here's what you should have learned today. You should have learned to be able to identify different types of cells, whether they are prokaryotic or eukaryotic, whether they are plant cells or animal cells. You should be able to understand the different kinds of cellular organelles and their structure and function, the endomembrane system, and how it works to secrete a protein. You got one more to go, membrane structure and function, so get to it.